Live from the Tower of Power and somewhere else. It's Men's Radio. Did you like
There's
that?
no expense spared on the jingle service here at Men's Radio, as you'll be delighted to hear.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. Huge. That budget
It's
is
a fantastic
stretching
budget.
to almost a bag of jamborees, spaceships, some no, you probably didn't have sherbet dabs.
No,
you probably did. Oh man, they were the
some
greatest.
people refer to us as budget smugglers. That's how much we spend on it.
Budget smugglers. Oh, with our jingles. No, I was talking about sweets. I suddenly got thinking when I was a little kid and would go to Ailes, which was the little post office shoppy next to Osage County Council Primary School in Southgate, where I grew up. And my biggest treat was picking sweets. It was great. There's a Facebook group on
Happy
Facebook.
Days.
Well done, Russell. Called, I think
there's a Facebook group on Facebook. Do you want to just double check that? I'd hate for you to misrepresent anything.
Shut your face. And it's Memories of Southgate, and I don't know any of the people on it, but I love the old photos of where I was lived until I was 9. It was great. Flash, he'll save every one of us. I haven't got a jingle.
And what was particularly exciting is the fact that your connection was a little bit ropey there. You sounded a bit robotic in the same sort of way that Queen did a lot of their hits.
Just so that you know, I have restarted the computer 3 times today. And restarted the internet service 3 times today.
Oh, I've no doubt. Double check nothing else is open, though, because you know how much it loves it.
Nothing else. Let me just check.
Nothing really matters.
Is there anything there? No, there is not. Just this rubbish which isn't working properly.
Splendid.
It never does. I'm in a very odd mood today. Veronica Curran. Hello there, Veronica, up in Edinburgh. Hello to Barry J. Allen. I've no idea where you are, Bazza. God knows. Don't know.
I'm feeling a bit ropey today, if the truth be told.
What's the matter?
I had my booster jab yesterday, and I'm feeling a bit.
Are you? Well, you see, you want to be young like me. I had my booster and absolutely no side effects whatsoever.
Well, what's really frustrating?
I don't understand it.
No, really, what's really frustrating for me is that everyone was banging on about AstraZeneca, and I had the first 2 doses I had were AstraZeneca. Mm-hmm. First one, I felt. Actually, the first one was pretty grim, actually. To tell you the truth, I was actually in bed for about 3 days after the first one. The second one didn't feel a thing. I wasn't even aware I'd had it. This one was Moderna, because they don't actually dish out AstraZeneca for the booster jab. So it's either Pfizer or Moderna as booster.
I'm a Pfizer
and
myself. Yeah, I'm a Pfizer.
I had Moderna, and I was thinking of changing my Twitter name to Lady Moderna. But the problem is that
you get a lot of new friends, especially around Old Compton Street.
Well, quite. And the problem is that I now sort of feel a little bit for it. I think the best way of describing it is I feel like I'm hungover without actually having drunk anything. That's the frustration of it.
What's the point of that?
No, don't tell me about
it. Go to New York State.
What the heck's the point?
Good day from New York State. He doesn't talk like that. I know, but it's just.
Although actually, RK, you know something? It's the cheapest way I've ever got to feel like this before.
Of course it is, because God forbid you put your hand in your pocket at the Soho Whiskey Club. Right. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Feeling good, looking great. Very proud of my attendees for my 4 Men to Talk groups over the last week, really opening up about how they are feeling. Why am I talking like Cliff Mitchell?
I don't know.
Family favourites.
Paul Andrews, Lady Moderna might stick. You never know, Dave.
No,
Who's Dave? Speaking of Dave.
This is the name.
Derek Edgeware. I think we should explain to anyone who hasn't got a clue what the heck we're talking about.
This made me die.
Russ and I were quite fortunate. We were treated. Well, I say treated. We had to pay for the blooming thing. We paid for the blooming thing, but it was a treat to go on it all the same. We went on a little walking tour of the East End of London, and as a result of it, our tour guide, whose name has completely escaped me for the moment. Sorry.
Are you serious? Esther Rinkoff.
Thank you, Esther Rinkoff. No, I'm being deadly serious. I'm not very good with names, as you well know. But Esther Rinkoff was a marvelous person. She of the Rinkoff Bakery heritage. Decided to tell us a little bit about some of the highlights of the East End of London and the history of it. Anyway, one particular part that really particularly tickled Russ and I for some stupid reason was she was talking about a hairdresser who made his way over there for some peculiar reason. His name, or he went under the name of Derek of Edgware. And I don't understand sort of why it was so funny, but it was hilarious.
I don't know why. This makes me laugh. So Derek of Edgware, it's not exactly Mr. Teasy Weezy of Mayfair. Anyway, Derek of Edgware has stuck. I'm very excited about our guest today. I'm going to be absolutely honest about it. I'm a huge fan of his, and I've been a huge fan of his for a very, very long time. Never thought I'd ever meet him. I just admired his work, and he did what one can only ask of comedians, and he made me laugh out loud. And then,
isn't it funny though that this never happens with any other profession? Would you ever stumble across, say, I don't know, a cartographer and say, "Oh, whilst you're here, can you draw me a map, please?" You wouldn't necessarily sort of say that, sort of like whilst you're a gynecologist, because you say, actually, never mind.
Well, you don't know. Depends how the party's going, to be honest with you. How many roofies have been given out? Anyway, so one day when I was chief barker of Variety, the children's charity, which was called the Variety Club back in the day, we had a stag night for the golfing society. It was absolutely heaving, and this guest was the cabaret. So I'm up at the top table, and he's standing just behind me, and his gags, and it was years ago, and I can still remember some of the gags. They absolutely creased me up, and it was a tough crowd because there was a load of pros. I think Ronnie Corbett was there, bless him. Tarbuck was definitely there. Davro was there. So it's a big crowd of pros as well as people. And Simon just slayed it. He slayed it. So without further ado, one of my comedy heroes, I don't care. I'm just going to say it. Simon Evans.
Hello. Thank you, Russ. I hope I can live up to that.
No, absolutely.
Yes, I mean, there's absolutely no pressure on our parts now.
No pressure there, Simon. No pressure at all.
Simon, could I ask a really pedantic favour? Can I ask a really pedantic favour, just so our lovely listener can see you in all your technicolor glory? Could you turn the device for us landscape, 90 degrees for us, just so we're in landscape mode? Look at that. That's splendid. Thank you. That's much better.
Are you in a nightclub?
No,
where are you? Are you in a coffee bar or something?
I'm in a coffee bar. I was trying to get across town to I don't live in London. I'm in London today, and my agent had offered me a room to conduct this in, but I underestimated the amount of time it would take to get across London, so I bolted halfway through and went into Cafe Nero. So that's why we are now kind of using very makeshift technology, I'm afraid.
Fantastic.
Well, might I be so bold as to suggest that it's very nice, because it's almost like we're just having a coffee with you. You're getting the true experience.
Yes. Absolutely. This is a
tell table 3 to shut up. But anyway.
Phil will have a flat white and just a double macchiato for me, please, Simon. Now, the other week, I took myself off to Brighton, thanks to Sophie Corbett, daughter of the legendary Ronnie Corbett, who did her first men's mental health group in a place I'd never heard of, and apparently was very famous, called Rockwater on Hove on the seafront. And you were due to be there, and then because of complications, you couldn't, because you were very, very busy. But you did a video, and I was stunned by this video. And I thought, oh my God, if there's any way I can reach out to Simon Evans and get him to come on the show, I will. Tell us, if you don't mind, about the subject of the video, because it was something I had not come across before, and it's of great importance.
Yeah, certainly. The theme of the evening, as you mentioned, was men's mental health. And my point really was that there are a lot of attempts to understand and frame that issue in terms of environment, context, time of life that you're going through, challenges you're facing, societal pressures, and so on. You can easily overlook simple, straightforward, really fundamental physiological causes for mental health and distress and depression and so on. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I was experiencing, I would hesitate to call it depression, but certainly a good deal of, I was very much below par, would be the best way to describe it, and it didn't feel to me a sustainable situation. And I'd read online a number of people discussing the sort of crisis facing the human endocrine system generally, our hormones, but in particular, testosterone levels in men at all ages, very much lower than they used to be. And so I decided to get a blood test and see whether that might be at the root of my problem. And lo and behold, it was. I had absolutely catastrophically low testosterone. I mean, really laughable. I reveal it in a.
Simon, I don't wish to bust in, but I do wish at the same time, because I tell you what, there was just one comment you made just now that I really think is important just to dig a little deeper, and then we'll go on to the whole subject of testosterone levels. Is you said that you felt a little below par, but you hesitate to use the word depression. Now, I feel that this is a really hot topic for MRS, where we actually struggle. In all the years that we've been doing this, we have really struggled to decipher exactly the difference between someone feeling a bit low or someone who is actually suffering depression. How did it manifest itself for you, just to give people an idea of maybe the difference? So what were you experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. I was experiencing a sense of indecision, a sense of not being equal to the day, a sense of just when will this all be over, and a sense of exhaustion, a sense of confusion, I suppose, but not like kind of insanity, but just a sense that I didn't quite understand what my priorities should be for the day, or whether it was more important to tidy my sock drawer or finish that final draft that had to be in this afternoon. And that kind of just a sense of disorder, I suppose, in my head as well. Yeah.
That is frightening, Simon, because in all seriousness, and please, I'm not jumping on the bandwagon. I'm going through so much of this right now. I've been feeling, as close friends know, just odd. I put it down to the fact that we've had 2 shitty years where our lives have been turned upside down, and the whole landscape of everything we understood has been just thrown in the air, and whatever. But the symptoms you're describing, it's uncanny. That's really uncanny.
Well, I do think it's probably a lot more widespread than most men will discuss. Obviously, I don't generalize. I think a lot of men have a close friend or two that they can talk these things through with over a beer. A lot of us were denied that over the last couple of years. We couldn't even quite make it down to the local. But to be fair, this episode on my behalf predated the pandemic, and in theory, I did have people I could talk to them about. But when you have a wife and kids, and a lot of them are going through, I suppose, more perhaps immediate and pressing concerns. When something is chronic and background, it never quite seems to be important enough to raise, does it? Until suddenly it's built up a certain sort of critical mass.
It doesn't, but at the same time, I feel that it takes a brave person to be able to even discuss it with friends. I mean, I have people who I consider to be close friends, people who I talk to quite openly with some things, but I have to confess, if it weren't for MRS, I probably wouldn't talk about half the things I talk about on this show with other people. It's very strange how we sort of all been programmed to not necessarily, even with close friends, talk about matters that either could be deemed embarrassing, talk about maybe feel inferior, or maybe just something that we don't even know how relevant it is.
Absolutely right, of course. I think giving it a frame like MRS is very important, because it legitimizes the conversation, and you don't feel any degree of embarrassment, I suppose. You don't feel so
self-conscious.
Self-indulgent, self-conscious, exactly, that's the word, yeah.
But you know what, Simon? It's really interesting, because you've used a phrase again that it's self-indulgent. Actually, it's really not. It's really not. If you're feeling terrible and you've got real issues, those are real issues. It's not you. Being self-indulgent is when some multi-millionaire Hollywood star talk show host is sitting in a, like a 30,000 square foot mansion going, I feel like I'm really in prison. You're going, shut up. You're not. You're a multi-squillionaire. You don't have a problem. Shut up about it. You're not in prison.
Oh, hang on. Now that's a slippery slope, Arcade. Just a cotton picking second. You can't say just because someone's got money that they don't have problems.
I'm not saying that. No. I'm not saying they may not be depressed or may not have mental issues. But they can't say, when people are worrying about how to put food on the table and are stuck in some council flat in Peckham, it's no good somebody coming from some magnificent mansion saying, well, this is a prison. We'd all swap. We'd swap. That's the point.
We would. No, we would. But we don't really at the same time know how someone else is feeling. And I think that it's a bit sort of teetering on the brink to say that just because someone's in a multi-million-pound mansion, they don't necessarily have problems.
There were one or two people who took advantage of the pandemic, I think, to keep themselves in the news by pleading a degree of anxiety or depression or burgeoning mania. I have one or two names in mind. There's no need to specify, but I think you have to be very wary. I don't necessarily hold it against anyone, whether they're a singer or a movie star or anyone like that, but I don't think they're necessarily the people we can most usefully draw parallels with or learn from. I think it's very difficult to be sure whether somebody is genuinely opening up or whether somebody is taking advantage of the currently fashionable trend for presenting yourself as a victim or so on in order to stay in the limelight. So it's just best to kind of keep your own conversations and keep it grounded with people you know and love.
Well, let's bring it back. Let's bring it back to you, Simon. So you go to the doctor, you have the testosterone test, and he goes, "Oh my God!" And you're going, "What the heck? What happened then?"
Physical doctor. I did. A nurse took the blood, but it was a private clinic. It was one of these ones that I suspect has like one morning a week in Harley Street in order to be able to have the address on their website. But I went in there. It was maybe 100, 150 quid, something like that. And but it was immediate as a result.
And you've just justified that one day a week.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. But I went in there anyway, and they took a fairly sort of large blood sample, and 48 hours later, I got a hugely detailed digital printout of everything from cholesterol to antibodies present or unpresent, suggesting, any kind of organ failure coming down the road. There were various cancers that could have been matched, or nothing nasty came up, but it was a very, very thorough check. And the one thing that was in the red was the hormone profile, and that everything else was fine. So in a way, it was quite good to say everything else is fine. And this is the one thing you need to worry about. And luckily, it's something that can be addressed.
And they address it. May I, and please, we have a rule on MRS. If you don't want to talk about it, tell us to sod off. It's not the BBC.
No, it's fine.
We're not going to drill down. But how was it addressed?
Well, there are a number of. Yeah, there are a number. Well, I suppose the first thing to say is, depending on your age and the degree to which you're below par, there are sort of non-pharmacological interventions which might be worth considering. Among those, I know one friend who literally, it's the most basic and obvious thing, but he basically got boxing training. He started going to see a one-on-one with a really good boxing trainer. And he said that as much as anything else, it was the experience of getting hit as much as getting fit. That actually, because, human beings, young men especially, they need a bit of rough play. They need a little bit of argy-bargy in their lives. This is how our bodies have evolved. And a lot of our problems come from homeostasis, just sitting calmly in the chair, central heating on and never confronting any physical challenges. So
I'll tell you something for nothing. If you want to, I'll tell you something for nothing. You want a physical challenge? Go get yourself a booster jab. I had mine done yesterday. It's whacked me out. I tell you, flipping it. Never would I encourage. Would I never encourage anyone to sort of not do it? Absolutely, you must. Please, if you are able to get a booster jab, do it. Go for it. 100%. It's worth it for the sake of a day or two. But my goodness me, it's taken the stuffing out of me.
But you see, Simon,
in order for that to work as a testosterone thing, you would have to want to punch the nurse. You wouldn't necessarily actually do it, but you'd have to feel you'd have to know that you'd been attacked and you needed to respond.
Well, this is the good
my
news,
nurse
Simon.
yesterday who did this was so scary. I'm not going to flipping well punch. Are you joking me? She would have snapped me in half.
But I have good news, because by pure chance, on something completely unrelated with work, I'm seeing Phil in about a couple of hours' time. So I'm just going to go up and punch him. And I'm going to feel so much better. I'm going to feel great. And I'm going to say, Simon Evans told me to do it when I'm in court.
Absolutely. Monitor your levels before and after and see if that works.
Yeah,
it's worth trying.
Straight away, it's going to make him feel better. So how long after you started, taking steps to address the testosterone level imbalance, if you like, did you start to notice a difference?
Well, to be clear, I didn't do the boxing training. My levels were very low. I was getting a bit old for that kind of stuff by then anyway. There are a couple of other things worth mentioning. If you're overweight, then getting rid of body fat is really helpful. That increases and improves your testosterone level. And the other thing is actually eating a certain amount of red meat, but obviously some people find there are problems with that in other regards. But anyway, those are the things that could help. I decided that I needed to go straight to the pharmacological. I tried. The NHS gave me a sort of gel which just did nothing at all except enrage dogs. Obviously, the testosterone was just staying on the surface of the skin, and I was not feeling any benefits. But I was obviously giving off scent. But eventually, long story short, I did go private and started getting injections, and then I managed to get the NHS to agree to give me those injections on prescription. So that's
sorry, just to be ignorant. So you're talking literally testosterone injections.
Yeah, it's called Sustanon. It's a sort of like an oil with testosterone suspended in it, I think, and it's a very small little capsule that you have to learn how to inject yourself. But it's intramuscular, not into the vein.
Ooh,
so it's not that scary. My wife actually does it, and the joke in my show is that I don't think the run up is strictly necessary, but apart from that, she's generous enough to be performing that once a fortnight. And yeah, almost immediately, I mean, within a month, certainly, I was right back on the rails. And honestly, I think since then, I would say I don't just feel better than I did like before the treatment. I think I feel the best I have done in years, possibly decades.
Oh,
I think I might have been suffering low-level testosterone like issues for maybe my whole adult life, for all I know. I don't know, but certainly I think that since married life, I think domestication can have that effect on men. I think that sense that you've lost your years as the prowling lone wolf, and that you're now just a papoose-wearing new man.
And were there any other symptoms? Were there any other symptoms that you noticed were the case? So, for example, you mentioned about sort of feeling quite low, not necessarily marrying up to the day ahead of you. Was that it, or were there any other signs that maybe in hindsight you realised?
The obvious one is the loss of libido, is the one that everyone associates with loss of testosterone. I had sort of written that off as just being part of getting old. There are loads of jokes about being unchained from a lunatic, and it's supposed to be quite a good thing on the whole. A lot of men would say that they feel more able to arrange their lives, on a more rational footing now that they're not just being led by the member downstairs. But
precisely.
Yeah, that comes back a little bit, and certainly the occasional, if I can say it as bluntly, the occasional spontaneous erection, which is quite nice. I wasn't completely.
Well, Phil's a very handsome young man. I understand. Don't be embarrassed.
I would suggest that it takes sort of a certain type of individual who I have to admire, who would say it openly in the middle of a coffee shop about this sort of discussion. So good work. And can I just say, well done, Glassy Amanda, who has noticed that there's a lot of, quote, background noise. Yes, that's because Simon has very kindly agreed to join us in the middle of a coffee shop. So we're very grateful to him for that. Sorry about the background noise, but hopefully what he's saying is absolutely worthwhile. Don't you apologise. We're very grateful to have you here.
So, I brought in this special microphone, but sadly that relies on the Wi-Fi in the coffee shop, which is your website thing says is unstable. So
well, yes, quite. I suspect that it's not the first time we've heard in history that Nero was unstable. But anyway,
very good,
very, very good. Let me ask you a question, Simon, because of your profession. Many years ago, I was having a conversation with Bob Monkhouse, who I thought was the greatest of all time in terms of stand-up and in terms of his writing ability. And he'd recently been on a show called In the Psychiatrist's Chair with Dr. Anthony Clare, which was a series that I was hugely fascinated by. And he was saying that he was shocked, but he accepted his ability to literally be at a funeral, and within an hour or so be on stage and killing it. And he started to feel guilty about that. And I realized I had that horrible ability as well. And I felt guilty about that I could do stuff under tragic circumstances. Do you think our brain just compartmentalizes? That's how we are?
When you say we, you mean comedians or natural performers, or just human beings?
Mainly performers and comedians who, get a bad press for being able to do that.
Quite early on in my comedy career, I met an American who was a little bit more experienced. Can't remember his name. He was over here touring for a while, and he told me that he was kind of like giving me a bit of a mentor talk about what a life is going to be like if this is what you're going to be, and this is who you're going to be, and these are the things you give up, and these are the things that you will gain. And he said, one thing you'll learn is that comedy is everything. It's meat and drink and fresh air. And he described how in between his mother dying and her funeral, he had gigged every single night. and had relied on it in order to stay sane, basically, in order to cope with his grief. He regarded it as part of the process. Although now, 25 years on, I don't even know if I'd say it was that. I would just say it's meat and drink, and I no more would stop doing comedy than I would stop drinking water. You know, it's healthy. It's absolutely healthy. There's a degree to which you are, of course, like demanding attention. You're centering and foregrounding yourself, and some people might regard that as selfish and acting out to some extent. But I think as long as you've found a way to make it work and you've integrated it into your wider persona, and in terms of whether you're compartmentalizing it, there are famously like two different kinds of comedian, the one that is only funny on stage and the one that's never off. And the one that's never off is a bit tiring, I think, to be honest. People who can't compartmentalize it, can be problematic. Yeah. I'm certainly not one of those. If anything, I'm slightly more serious off stage now than I used to be before I was a comedian. You know, I'm more prone to have serious, earnest conversations rather than try and crack jokes and see where the pun can be grabbed or whatever in the middle of conversation. Almost as if I've kind of demonstrated that I'm capable of doing that, and now I want to what other things I can do. You know,
I've been out for dinner, and I won't mention the name again, but with somebody very, very well known. There was only 4 of us at dinner, and this guy wouldn't switch off. And eventually I said, "Look, there's only the 4 of us here. Please, you don't have to be performing for us. We're just having a dinner as mates. Please stop, because I'm exhausted from this. You know, just want to have a normal conversation."
Impressionists, I adore people who can do impressions. I find it. I have a childlike joy watching people who can do them well. But I have noticed again, they cannot stop. They cannot help it. Absolutely cannot help it at all. And it's like, it's for them, it's part of doing talking. It's like, I guess, in the same way that other people's conversation is entirely peppered with things that other people have said in previous conversations. So I guess it's like that. I don't know.
It is. Listen, thank you. We're going to let you get on. So I'm sure your schedule is ludicrous today, but really, really appreciate you finding time to join us. Thank you so.
Absolute pleasure.
What you've said, it's a subject that we started this in when we started January 2019, and Women's Radio the year before, and I don't think it's ever come up. It's really interesting.
Well, I don't remember talking about it, I'm sure.
There are certain strands of conversation on Twitter, if people are interested in following up. There are some accounts that really sort of focus on it, and others that have focused on the wider issue of the degree to which it is a worldwide phenomenon, you know, and is affecting not just humans as well, but all kinds of things like alligators in the Florida swamps and so on. You know, there's something very strange going on, and nobody can quite work out what's causing it. But of course, you can only really, fix your own backyard. So that's where you start at any rate, I think.
Can I hazard a guess? I'm no medical professional at all, but I would suggest that one thing that probably isn't helping at all is that life seems to be really quite stressful at the moment. And I wonder whether or not we're being so distracted with everything we have to deal with, we're almost forgetting to be ourselves. I know that sounds really silly, but that's the way I feel.
Stress is definitely an indicator. It's stress lowers testosterone. Stress, obesity, which is also caused by stress, because stress is relieved short-term by eating sugary foods. You know, that's definitely connected. All these things, they are that you've got to create either virtuous or vicious circles in life. That's, I think, definitely true. Things either start to gain momentum in the right or the wrong direction. And and testosterone gets caught up in that, if you're not careful.
Simon, thank you so much. Seriously.
Simon, you've been
absolute
great.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a great, what am I going to say these days? Holiday season.
Have a good sod that, for goodness sake, for crying out loud. Have a good happy Christmas and have a good New Year. Absolutely. Gracious me. No, none of that. Not do me a favor. I absolutely refuse to be part of cancel culture. Do me a favor. Crying out loud. Not allowed to wish someone Merry Christmas, my eye.
It is complete nonsense, isn't it? It is nonsense.
Well, I say it to everybody. You know what? The other day, someone said to me, I must admit, I wasn't thinking about this, but I wish someone who was based in, I think it was Turkey, or was it? Oh no, it was Azerbaijan. I was messaging someone who is a contributor for another program I work on, and wished him Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And he said, "Oh, we don't celebrate Christmas in this country."
You got a fat one there on you? They're going to kill you?
And I thought, oh, okay. I mean, you could have just said thanks, you too, but no problem.
Too easy. No, too easy. Let's cause controversy when you can say thank you. I'll tell you what's really interesting. I'm doing. It's taken a long time to set up, and I'm doing mentoring for young folks who want to.
Good God.
Well, that's not quite the reaction I was hoping for.
Well, no, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's very admirable of you. Just wondering sort of what sort of folk you're mentoring and what are you mentoring them on?
People who they're like 16. It's an organisation called ORT, O-R-T.
Oh yes, I've heard of ORT.
And they said, "Would you like to be a mentor?" And it's taken, I suppose, with all the crap that's going on, about a year to sort it all out. And I've got my student who is 16, lives in Mile End. It's all done remotely. And I'm actually, Phil, getting more out of it than she probably is. She's a charming girl. She's just delightful. Of Bangladeshi origin, was born over there but came over at 2 months old. So she's grown up. So she's really, she's a Londoner. But it's so interesting getting the perspective from A, someone who's 16, B, seeing how they see life, what they see as the difficulties and, what it's about. And so I mentor her. I set her little tasks every week. And it's you start to understand what they see as an issue, or what
when you say they, sorry, do you mean someone of the age of 16? You mean?
Yeah. I'm thinking of someone who's never had a job. I mean, this kid is doing her mocks. Just charming. But some of the
gracious me, Martin Bell, you busy so and so. He says here, excellent, Russ, and he goes on to say, so many could do with this help. I have 4 teens that I mentor. Good work, Martin. Glassy, meanwhile, says it's great to mentor, very rewarding. I do it as part of the job with my students. And she goes on to say, I so agree, Russ. Yeah, and she goes on to say, I so agree, Ross. They have no idea how much they give us. Well, there you go. Good work. I have to tell you, actually, there's sort of a couple of weeks. Do you remember I was absolutely terrified a few weeks back when I was going to go and give a talk
Who can forget the drama?
Well, I don't think it was drama. I'd never done anything like that before.
Like the end scene of Titanic.
I don't think it was that bad. But anyway, actually, no, hang on a sec. And the point is that
I just jump in? Well, I remember. I was having dinner. You remember I told you I'd forgotten that I'd written a book? I've completely forgotten the book came out. Would you like to come down? So I went down for dinner to the lady whose book it was. And I'd written the text, basically. And it was a design book. And people were talking, and someone was saying they were at a school do. There was only 4 people at the dinner table, and it was very nice. And the person said they were at a school production, a thing, and they were doing impressions and stuff, and they did the impression of the end scene of Titanic, right? And the boy and the girl in the school were doing that, and suddenly a voice said, no, I'm suing you, it was like this. And up from the audience ran this woman. It was Kate Winslet.
Oh my God.
It was Kate. And she got up and she did the whole thing. I mean, it was so. I thought that was hilarious.
Wow!
Can you imagine? You're at a small.
That must have been one hell of a moment.
You're at a small school function, and suddenly Kate Winslet says, "No, that's not how you do it." I mean, what a laugh! What a good sport! What a good sport!
That's amazing.
That's hilarious. Right?
Good gracious!
So you were very worried about giving this.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just saying I got sort of really twitchy about it, but actually I think that sort of by the end of it, when I realized that maybe they weren't as scary as I first thought, actually it was all right. And I don't know whether or not they got anything out of it. I think 1 or 2 did. I believe that there were quite a few in that room who I was talking to who probably didn't have an interest in what I was saying, but that's fine. I made sure they listened. They had the opportunity to decide for themselves whether or not they were going to get anything out of it. I certainly wasn't going to tolerate anyone speaking over me or ignoring what I was saying if I've made the effort to actually go there and talk.
I'm going to ask a serious question, God forbid. How are you planning to control a room like that?
I don't know how to plan for it, but when the moment arose, it actually sort of presented itself as a potential problem, and I shut it down quite quickly. So, I mean, there was a moment where a couple of pupils, students, whatever you want to call them, were sitting there and just started talking to each other right in the middle of when I was talking. And I turned to them and I said, "Oh yeah, sorry, is there a problem?" And they're looking quite embarrassed because I sort of shamed them in front of the class. This chap said, "No." I said, "Excellent, I'll continue then." So it was a moment like that.
You're in good company. Back in the days when I had a life, the Williams Formula One team, I'm going way back, asked me to be their host for the weekend. It was like one of the greatest weekends of my life. So I was down at Silverstone British Grand Prix for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in their VIP suite, doing all the interviews and liaising. It was it was just sensational. I can't tell you how wonderful it was interviewing the late Frank Williams. Then the wonderful Alex Zanardi had a terrible NASCAR crash when he left to go to America, which I'm not going to go into details in case you're planning to have lunch. And into the luncheon area, we all had lunch, and there was like a VIP, beautifully done. And Jackie Stewart came in to give a talk, and some people were kind of pretty well oiled by that point. The race obviously hadn't started, and champagne and everything was flowing. And a bit of a hubbub, people started chatting at a table. Wow, you wouldn't want to mess with Sir Jackie Stewart. He just said, hello, is this mic not working? Is this mic not reaching table number 17? And you thought, shut up. You better shut up, because you're going to get both barrels from Jackie Stewart. It was really, really interesting how he controlled the room. He wasn't having it.
I could only imagine.
Now here we go. Let's get back on track. So, right, Veronica Curran up in Edinburgh. Would you like to read this out, Philip?
I would love to. Veronica Curran says, "We're looking at a mental health crisis. Churches are no longer allowing homeless people to use of food kitchen and shelter, face-to-face counselling services. It's so sad. These men, women, and children are not protected." Well, Veronica, you're quite right.
That's not good, is it?
You're quite right. I would suggest, though, that sort of quite a lot of religious institutions do work within their boundaries over winter. I know that sort of from last year that our local synagogue that I go to did try their best to work within their means, obviously COVID restrictions permitting, to try and help those who they normally in shall we suggest normal years would help otherwise. So I do understand sort of the concern there, and absolutely it is quite disconcerting. It's only a few months ago that even when there weren't any COVID restrictions, I stumbled across a chap who was, this is just matter of fact rather than sort of trying to get a pat on the back for it, by the way, but a chap who was clearly homeless. And I was with a friend of mine who happens to work in mental health, and he and I both noticed that this chap was sitting on the pavement bawling his eyes out. And so we stopped and we had a good old chat about half an hour. So I think that it is rife that we sort of sometimes think that people who are...
and as you walked up the street, did you hear him suddenly cheer and go, "Well, thank Christ I'm not Phil Dave"?
Well, quite absolutely.
You cheered him up. You just cheered him up.
It is true. It was sort of really by sort of powers of deduction that he realised just how lucky he actually was. Still,
do you know what? I'm taking the piss, but what a beautiful thing to do.
Well, I have to confess something.
I'm not, because I know we rip into each other the whole time, and everyone expects us to, and that's what we do. That's the nature of the show. But let me just say this: for you to do that, you and your pal, it shows the sort of human being that you are. And
I have to confess something, and I will openly admit this, that had I not been with my friend who happens to work in said industry, I don't know if I would have done it, if I'm honest.
I get that, because let's be brutally honest, you get scared. I don't think
totally. I don't know whether or not he would have lashed out. I don't know if he would have been offended.
I don't think people ever have the balls to really say this. People say, "Oh, I was too busy," or "I didn't want to." No, I think the truth of it is, human beings, you think, they got a knife? Are they on drugs? Is he as crazy as a box of frogs? Is he going to attack me? I'm a bit nervous. But
actually, especially as I once actually,
truth of it, isn't it? Let's be honest. That's why
I tell you, I once sort of had this. I once had this idea for a program that I don't really sort of mind I don't really want to go too much into the
It's a
details
really
because
good show. It's a good show.
No, because I was saying potentially it's a good program, and if I'm brutally honest, I don't want to give it away. However,
don't.
I did approach as part of said program someone who was homeless by association. He was a big issue seller, and people in hindsight have told me, especially when I've spoken to professionals, just never do that. You've got to be pretty darn crackers to approach people who you don't know their backstory, you don't know what conditions they're living with, you don't know how they're going to react to you approaching. They may be hideously offended by you approaching. And to top it all off, I was doing it potentially in the name of what some could describe as entertainment. It was never meant to be entertainment. For me, it was only ever about information.
Entertainment.
Yeah, well, no, but it was, to me, it's about the sort of the whole notion of introducing the subject of homelessness. And I'll say no more than that. But the point is that based on that, understandably, one of them actually sort of, there was a friend of his who he was with and said, I trust you're going to pay him for this. And it started getting a bit nasty quite quickly. So I wasn't necessarily sort of that prepared for that. No, I wasn't prepared for it at all. And I had to sort of think on my feet and shut it down fairly quickly and say, look, I'll be brutally honest with you. It's just an idea at this stage. I don't have a budget for it. I never meant any offense by it. It's to do this, that, and the other.
What happened to your idea of getting? And I thought it was great at the time. You got, if I remember it correctly, you got professional dancers, and then people vaguely in show business who aren't professional dancers, and it's like a competition every week. What happened to that?
Yeah, it was strange, really. It was. I don't actually know sort of whatever happened to Simply Go Dancing.
Another one you came up was fantastic. You get a judging panel. I think you said to me of like professional cooks. I don't know if you remember this one. And then you get people vaguely in the public eye, and they have to cook and bake.
Well, I have to tell you, with the idea of Simply Come Prancing, I don't actually know sort of what happened to that.
No,
but I approached the BBC with it.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, strange. Okay, no, anyway, I quite see. Chrissy Richards, who's off in sunny Spain, says, hi, boys. Our concert was really good. I have a couple of small videos put on Facebook if you're interested. Chrissy, yes. We said we want to see it, definitely.
What is this? The street has some... Oh, God, Dave. I'm not... Oh, dear. Paul Andrews, do you know, this is my answer to nearly every piece of bullshit that comes across my desk. I go, Christ, it's monkey tennis. How am I going to tell them? It's just monkey tennis. I haven't got the time to explain what that is, but yes, Paul, you're absolutely blooming right. Glassy Amanda, I once saw a homeless person outside Tesco in a terrible state. It was freezing cold. He had nowhere to sleep that night, so I went home, got black. Oh, God. When you finish reading that, it's a bit emotional. Sorry.
So I went home, got blankets and warm clothes, drove back and gave it to him with people giving me dirty looks, but I didn't care.
First of all,
their
Amanda,
problem.
What an amazing human you are. Secondly, Sodom, why were they giving you dirty looks? What is the matter with people?
People are very, very strange, you know.
People, do you know what it is? I think it's their guilt.
100%.
Their guilt. Here's somebody who's gone out, gone home, got stuff, given it to them, you know, and not wanting.
Without a shadow of a doubt, you've hit the nail on the head there, because it's either their guilt or it's people sort of thinking to themselves, I don't have the backbone to do it, therefore I'm going to judge someone else for doing it. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
What have we got? Stephen, I'm coming back to your comments. Sorry to dash about a little bit there. Admiral, you'd like to do mentoring? Yes. I'm running around today for the entire day after this, all over the shop. But yes, I will put you in touch with this organization. You would be a fantastic mentor. You'd be brilliant, especially in your field. So yes, I will do that. If I haven't done it within a few days, just send me a message, Stephen, and I'll put you straight in touch with the charity.
Now, I know that you have an understandable aversion to me eating anything on air, but I have to be completely honest.
You're feeling faint. You're feeling.
I'm gonna have a dextrose because I'm feeling a little bit dodgy.
Go ahead.
All right.
So you go away. Sorry. You go away for a minute and have your dextrose. Right. Now, when Simon Evans was on, by the way, if you've never seen his stand-up, he's fantastic. It's so subtle. Let's go straight across to New York State. I didn't have time to discuss this at the time because I wanted Simon to be able to speak at length, even though he was in Cafe Nero. And Azadon Brown, who's very high up in the psychotherapeutic community in America, says this. This is a real hot potato, gang. It's not masculine. Or at least this is what society has programmed us to think. But mental health knows no boundaries or allies. I don't know about allies. You have to explain that, Azadon Brown. I love it when the Americans have so many names. Chuck Weintraub Jr. the third. It's always that. It's interesting that you say that, but that goes to the very heart of men's radio, doesn't it? Grow a pair, man.
Oh, totally, totally. And it really is ghastly. I mean, there are some things where I have to say I worry about we're sort of being a little too casual with not necessarily using that expression. And in particular, I talk about what I only describe as the snowflake generation, who just get so easily offended at everything and so unbelievably wound up over what is really nothing. I do think that we need to be careful with that front. But when it comes to sort of potential serious subjects, then we are. I think we're getting better on that front.
The reason why I am passionate, and Phil is passionate, and everybody on men's radio station and women's radio station, we're passionate about what we do. And the reason I'm so passionate about this, I'm just going to have to say some of this because this is really very, very difficult, and it's a huge topic of conversation. So many people say life was simpler. I'm going to be very careful how I dance around this, all right? So bear with me. Life was simpler when men were men and women were women, and we all kind of knew what we were, and we could work with that. That does not negate anything about mental health issues, by the way. And so what you're doing is you're walking a tightrope between saying it's okay to not be okay. I know it sounds horribly Californian, but you know what I'm saying, gang. You know what I'm saying here. It's okay. You don't have to put on this brave face all the time. It's best to talk about it. But when it gets even more confusing is when the lines start to get blurred.
Well, I think the biggest issue is something like that, of course, is that when you've got the reason why I think a lot of people would say that it was easier back then when men were men, women were women, is because the awful truth is, whether we like it or not, those who are affected by confusion over gender, stereotype, gender sexuality, and all of that malarkey is actually sort of quite minimal in the grand scheme of things. It may be becoming more popular because more and more people are feeling comfortable enough to come out of the woodwork and say it. However, to the masses, it is not normal to them. Doesn't mean it's not normal. Doesn't mean it's not normal. It's not normal to them. And for that reason alone, it starts to freak them out because then they start questioning, well, hang on a second, why do I feel the way I feel? And what you're actually doing is you're inadvertently causing another sort of crisis when you're allowing the relief that's long overdue for people who have been suffering it for a long time or living with it for many years to start sort of feeling more like they are part of society, regardless of how they think or feel. But indirectly, what it's doing is the scales are going the other way. It's sort of tipping it the other direction now, where those who have lived their lives in a fairly normal, in inverted commas, capacity for so many years are now starting to question it and feel a bit uncomfortable themselves. So it's as you say, it's a tightrope, it's a balancing act, whatever other cliche you want to use, and that's the problem.
By the way, I did ask a very well-known person who has gone from a man to being a woman, very well known, especially in our world, Phil. And I asked them almost at the beginning when Howard and I kicked off MRS to come on as a guest, and they still haven't. And I wonder kind of why. I don't know if they thought they were going to get a rough ride. I'm not going to get a rough ride at all. I think we just want education. See what it's about. Right, we're going to disappear.
It's actually quite surprising because if it's who I think you're talking about, which I'm fairly sure it is, they are quite open and honest. They're arguably the most open and honest I know.
Well, we could reach out again. We'll reach out for 2022. It would be a variant. You know who it is.
Paul Claridge, by the way, has written a novel.
It's not Paul Claridge. Paul Claridge has no...
Hello. No, I don't mean it's Paul Claridge in the question.
You say, because we're talking about this person who's transgender, and you go, oh, Paul Claridge, by the way.
No, I don't mean that Paul Claridge is the person who's transitioned. Thank you very much indeed. I was saying, by the way,
he's transitioned from Desperate Dan to Paul Claridge.
I had no idea that the subjects were supposed to merge so seamlessly, and I can only apologise to our conversation monitor sitting to my right that was the case. Anyway, right. Anyway, Paul Claridge says, a lot of the homeless guys and girls around East Croydon have become friends of mine. Sometimes all they want is someone to acknowledge them, to speak with them, and show them that they are not forgotten. I chat with them every day. We have a laugh, and I sometimes help them with doctor's appointments, etc. Conversely, when I'm threatened or abused by someone, it's often my homeless friends who come running to my aid. So there you go.
Isn't that interesting? Out of all our listeners all over,
do you mind if I suggest, Paul, it's your friends who come running to your aid? Doesn't define them.
Yes, by the way, it's our regular Ramsey Y. Musalam's birthday today. And as Sen has pointed out, happy birthday, Ramsey. They will be to celebrate, covering each other with Taram Masalata and licking it off. But anyway, that's what
they're going for. Basically, they're celebrating. They're celebrating by giving new definition to going for a dip.
Oh, that's very good.
I thank you.
That's very, very good. That's very, very, very good indeed. Back to Edinburgh now, gang. What have we got? We have a couple of Edinburgh men separately doing amazing things for homeless. It's actually, Veronica, there's something I saw on TV I will need your help on. I want to get them on. Being a good Samaritan, we're kind of scared of doing it, aren't we? We're kind of scared of doing it in some ways, and it's unfair because it would be so little from us and could mean a lot for people. I don't know. It's got so complicated. It shouldn't be complicated because you don't want to be seen as patronizing. You don't want to be seen as doing someone a favor. I mean, you are doing somebody a favor, but you don't want it to come across like that. Does that make any sense? I don't think I've explained that well.
Well, I think that you're doing it with the other person's best interests at heart, but you don't want to come across as if you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Well, you're Lord of the Manor and they're some sort of serf. And
you don't want to look down on someone. That's terrible.
I think you're giving them the crumbs off your table at Christmas. Yeah, all that crap. It's funny because Glassy Amanda was talking about going to get blankets and stuff. There was a girl outside Tesco's before pandemic. It was late at night. I used to like going shopping very late at night. She's outside with a dog. And she looked so bloody miserable. And it was cold. So I went in. I had to get some stuff. I don't know what the hell it was. It was late at night. I don't know. It was about 11:30 at night, 11:45 or something. And at midnight, I mean. And so I got her a couple of sandwiches and I got the dog some treats. And I gave it to her. And then I realized, being the idiot that I am, I'd forgotten something. So I put the stuff I bought in my car in the Tesco's car park, and I walked back in. And she asked me the same pitch again. And I said, I've just given you some, that was me. It was about a minute ago. I just gave you some sandwiches and some dog food. I think she was in such a bad way. I don't think it registered. And then I felt terrible. I'll be honest. I'm going to be really open with you. I felt terrible for the dog. I know I'm going straight to hell.
No, excuse me.
I'm going straight to hell. Fine.
No, excuse me. Definitely not. Dogs don't ask to be homeless. I'm sorry. I know they're great company for those who really do struggle on the streets. And without a shadow of a doubt, they probably keep them as sane as they possibly can be. But I absolutely refuse to sort of think that just because something is a dog, that it doesn't have feelings and isn't capable of getting quite distressed in the situation it's in.
I got 8 minutes. We got 8 minutes. Sorry, let me just open up this thing. I got to put. Can you? Let's put up. We need more. That's from Aza in New York State. We need more Good Samaritans. Yes, we bloody well do. Thanks, Aza. I hope you come to London and we can get you on the show and have lunch with you. Amanda says people get annoyed when we talk to and help homeless people because they say, "Wait for this. Wait for this." It encourages them to hang around. Oh, F off. Makes me sick, she says. Where's the You know, what the hell? It's when the banks, do you remember when the banks along the Strand put up spikes? Do you remember that, Phil? Remember they put up the spikes?
Well, no, I do have to say, and you might not like this very much, but I do believe that if someone possesses private property, they're perfectly entitled, whether it's morally pleasant or not, they are perfectly entitled to say whether or not they want somebody to sleep within that area. And I have to tell you that I don't blame them for private property. I'm very sorry, but I really don't. But don't get me wrong, it's not very compassionate.
Well, there's a moral law, and there's the law, and within the law, you're right. The banks were right morally. It was just such a horrible, visceral image of a physical metal spike. We hate you so much. Here is a medieval spike that we're putting up in the year back then, 2020, to tell you to piss off. It's grim. I mean, I think it's the image of an actual, you know what I mean? Right, here we go. Very, very quickly. I've been asked, and we've got them coming on. I can't remember when. I want to see where you stand with this. A particular charity reached out to me, and they were going on. Would I get them on to discuss the fact that they look after dogs that belong to the homeless, but they want Sadiq Khan and TfL to not make the charity members have to pay the ULEZ charge, ULEZ, ultra low emission zone. And I wrote back and I said, look, I think what you're doing is fantastic. I think what your charity is doing is fantastic. But the answer is no. I'm happy for you to come on and talk about the charity. But if you get exempt, then every charity worker going to any office, they should be exempt. Every nurse has got to be exempt. Every doctor, everyone, or drop the whole damn thing.
Better still. But yes.
I mean, my thing would be, screw it. Drop the congestion charge. And I mean, I've always said that it's a bloody pain in the ass, and it's just it's a tax. I get, again, morally, I get it, but I can't have one charity on and you and I go, and then every charity would have every right to write to you and I and go, Russ, Phil, hang on a minute. We represent children, or we represent cancer patients, or we represent heart patients, or we represent battered women, or whatever it might be. Violence against children. I don't know what,
I suspect that I think the bottom line is it's absolutely nothing to do with whether or not they're a charity or not. The whole point is that the ULEZ exists ultimately to cut emissions. And just because someone happens to work for a charitable organization does not mean that their vehicles are any less polluting than the next person's vehicle, who just happens to be an everyday citizen, so to speak, and not a charity. So I think that you've got to be fair about why it exists. I don't agree with the ULEZ personally. I'm very anti it. I think that it is ultimately a tax on those who cannot afford to get a new car.
A tax on those who are ill-equipped to afford this. This is what it's about.
So I think from that perspective, it's pretty abhorrent. But if you look at it as what it's meant to be about, which is trying to reduce the emissions on the streets of London, what you could argue, albeit a weak argument, I grant you that, is that those who are unfortunate enough to be living on the streets of London, thanks to the ULEZ, could potentially be breathing cleaner air, if you see what I mean. So it swings in roundabouts.
You see where I stood on this, because I thought, well, once you do it, you can't do it for one, not do it for everybody else. Let's not forget, says Dave Sleet of ANA, that local authorities used to use street washing machines throughout the night to clear people from sleeping in high-profile areas. Wowzer.
Wow.
The problem in America has got off the scale in particularly Los Angeles and Santa Monica. It's unbelievable what's happened. It's changed it radically.
What I'm slightly surprised about, though, is that there was this great notion once, not so long ago, of people converting old crates. You know, those metal crate things that used to transport goods on ships. Yeah, the metal containers, the shipping containers. Thank you. Anyway, there was this notion to convert a whole load of those because they have to meet a certain standard, certain criteria. It doesn't mean that they're not solid anymore. It just means that they're not necessarily that usable when you're lifting heavy goods out of them. Anyway, a lot of them just end up on the scrap heap. And there was this great organization, I don't remember who the heck it was, who came up with this idea of converting a whole load of shipping containers into little dwellings. So stacked on top of one another.
What's it called? Wait for it. Crate Expectations.
Oh, boom, boom. Anyway.
Come on. Pretty good.
I really don't know. But anyway, whoever it was, whatever it was, I thought it was a terrific idea, and it never seemed to materialize, sadly.
Mass experiment. Oh, yeah. Do you want me to do that one again?
On fire today.
Thank you. Let's go to Spain. When I go shop, it's a bloody good idea. And by the way, near me, they've got those. They've converted them into shops, and they're fantastic. There's a coffee shop. They're shipping containers converted into a shop. One's a coffee shop. One's a barber's. You should see what they've done to it. It's fantastic. Seriously, absolutely fabulous. When I go shopping outside my shop, there's an old lady begging. She asked for chicken and octopus. Blimey. It's a bit random. I bought her a small bag of octopus cubes, I think that is. She was ecstatic. It's like I'd given her $1 million. Wowzer. It's very specific. Could you spare something? Could you spare? I've got some change. No, I don't want change. Actually, what I want is some chicken and octopus. Could you do the chicken in like a light paprika sauce? If you've got it. I don't want to put you into too much trouble. Now, the octopus, what I'd like is lightly fried, slightly al dente. Side salad would be good.
And maybe everyone gets a leg at Christmas. Hey, right, okay. And on that note, right, I suggest that on that note, we leave it there and we say huge thank you. Thank you very much indeed to our sensational guest, Simon Evans. Terrific stuff.
Yeah, great.
Thank you very much for all of your comments, as ever. You know, we appreciate it. It'd be a very boring hour if we didn't have you.
All over the world. Thank you, guys.
Beautiful. And all being well, we will see you on Friday at midday.
Wish you better, young Philip.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.